The twin suns of Helios system cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime as the morning light began to fade. Commander Kristy Ren stood on the observation deck of the colony's central command complex, watching the delicate violet leaves of the native sky trees ripple in the gentle breeze. Zephyria Prime had been humanity's most successful off-world colony in decades, a thriving community of 40,000 Zephyrians, the native species with violet skin marked by silver speckles that shimmered like stardust when they felt strong emotions. Kristy's comm unit buzzed urgently. "Commander Ren, this is Lieutenant Jax. We've got anomalous readings from Sector Gamma 7. Kristy frowned. "Run a diagnostic. Probably just solar flares from Helios Prime." "It's not solar, ma'am. These readings, they're unlike anything in our database, and they're moving fast." Kristy's heart skipped a beat. She'd heard stories of the Krylos Empire, reptilian conquerors who swept through systems, harvesting chroniton particles that were essential for time manipulation technology. The Galactic Assembly had warned about them, but everyone assumed Zephyria Prime was too remote to attract their attention. "Put it on my display," Kristy ordered, already moving toward the command center. As she entered the bustling hub of activity, she saw the tactical display showing 6 massive Krylos dreadnoughts emerging from hyperspace, their jagged black hulls blotting out the stars. They moved with terrifying precision, positioning themselves for orbital bombardment. "Status report!" Kristy shouted, her silver commander's insignia gleaming under the emergency lights. Lieutenant Jax turned, his face pale. "Krylos fleet, 12 capital ships and 18 support vessels. They've already disabled our orbital defense grid. Ground assault teams are landing in sectors 4 and 7. Kristy steadied herself against the command console. The Krylos were known throughout the galaxy for their merciless efficiency. They didn't conquer worlds, they harvested them, stripping planets of chroniton particles until they became dead rocks floating in space. The Zephyrians' entire civilization was built around these particles. Without them, their technology would fail, their society would collapse. "Communications?" Kristy asked, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "Still operational, but they've jammed all outgoing signals," replied Ensign Alexandra, her fingers flying across the console. "We can't reach the Galactic Assembly." Kristy studied the tactical display. The nearest assembly military base was in the Orion sector, at least 5 days away at maximum warp speed. Even if they could get a message through, help would arrive too late. "The chroniton pulse," Kristy said quietly. The room fell silent. The chroniton pulse was their last resort, a device capable of sending a message backward through time, but using it would reveal their exact location to the Krylos. The energy signature would be unmistakable. "Commander, if we activate it, they'll target us immediately," Jax warned. "I know," Kristy said, her voice firm. "Begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel to the underground chroniton shelters. Get the civilians to safety." Through the reinforced viewport, Kristy could see the first Krylos landing craft descending, their angular shapes cutting through the atmosphere like knives. The distinctive violet glow of Zephyrian energy weapons flickered in the distance, as the colony's defense forces engaged the invaders. "Krylos ships are moving to bombardment formation," reported Tactical Officer Kale. Kristy looked around at her team, people she had worked with for years, building this colony into a beacon of cooperation between humans and Zephyrians. Now they faced extinction. "Activate the chroniton pulse," Kristy ordered. Alexandra hesitated only a moment before inputting the command sequence. A low hum built within the walls as the powerful device charged. "Message parameters?" Alexandra asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Standard distress protocol," Kristy said. "Include all available data on Krylos forces." The building shook as the first bombardment struck nearby. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Add sector coordinates 942, Jack suggested. "That's near human territory." Kristy frowned. "Why?" "Covering all bases. The signal will reach them first, even if they can't help." Kristy nodded. Humanity had only recently joined the Galactic Assembly, their technological capabilities considered primitive compared to established spacefaring civilizations. but protocol demanded notification of all assembly members in range. Add it to the transmission, she agreed. The chroniton pulse reached full power, its distinctive tone rising to a pitch almost beyond hearing. Energy readings spiked dangerously across the room. "Pulse ready," Alexandra reported. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The lights flickered. "Do it," Kristy ordered. Alexandra pressed the final command. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a pulse of energy surged through the building. The lights went out completely before emergency power kicked in. "Signal sent," Alexandra confirmed. The building shook again, more violently this time. Structural warnings flashed on the remaining operational screens. "Direct hit to the east wing," Kale reported. "They found us." Kristy stood straight, smoothing down her uniform jacket. "Begin data purge. Evacuate all remaining personnel to fallback positions." As her team rushed to comply, she looked once more at the tactical display showing the overwhelming Krylos force. The distress signal was away, racing backward through time. But she knew the truth, that no one wanted to say aloud. Help would come too late. The Zephyrians of Zephyria Prime were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. The Galactic Assembly chamber was rarely filled to capacity. Today, every seat was taken. Representatives from over 200 species sat in tiered rows around the central speaking platform. The atmosphere was tense as reports of the Krylos attack on Zephyria Prime appeared on everyone's data screens. Admiral Thorne stood at the center of the chamber, his muscular frame casting a long shadow across the holographic display showing the Krylos fleet positions. His translator converted his deep voice into standard galactic. "The Krylos force consists of 12 capital ships and at least 18 support vessels," he said, pointing at the tactical display. "Our nearest rapid response fleet is currently 5 days from the Helios system." A wave of concerned murmurs swept through the chamber. Everyone knew what that meant. By the time help would arrive, the colony would be destroyed. "Can we not send a faster ship?" asked Representative Lorna of the Veln Collective. Her delicate antennae quivered with agitation. "Surely we have something that can get there sooner?" Admiral Thorne shook his head. "Our fastest scout ships could arrive in 3 days, but they carry no weapons capable of engaging Krylos dreadnoughts." From the highest tier, an ancient voice spoke. Representative Zorin of the Eldari race leaned forward, his wrinkled face barely visible beneath his ceremonial hood. The Eldari were among the oldest species in the Assembly, respected for their wisdom. "The distress signal would have passed through Sector 942, Zorin noted. "Human space." There was a moment of puzzled silence before nervous laughter broke out among several representatives. "The humans?" said Defense Minister Krell. "They can barely maintain stable warp fields with their primitive technology." This wasn't entirely fair. Humans had developed warp travel only a century ago, which was why they had been granted provisional membership in the Assembly. But their ships were slow and few in number. Earth had only established 3 small colonies beyond their home system. "Minister Krell is right," Admiral Thorne said. "The humans have no military presence outside their immediate territory. They have fewer than 30 interstellar vessels total, and only 8 with any form of armament. They're simply not a factor in this situation." Representatives nodded slowly, conceding the point. "We should inform them officially nonetheless," said Senator Elizabeth Vance, the human delegate. She was one of only 4 humans in the entire Assembly's central government. "My people would want to know." "Of course, Senator Vance," said High Chancellor Marn. His translucent tendrils rippled in what the more experienced delegates recognized as impatience. "But we must focus on practical responses. Admiral, what preparations are being made for the refugees, if there are any?" Admiral Thorne activated a new display. "We're preparing refugee processing facilities in the Orion system. Medical ships are already en route, but given typical Krylos tactics." He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew the Krylos rarely left survivors. As the discussion continued, Senator Vance quietly left her seat and moved to a private communication booth at the back of the chamber. She placed her hand on the security scanner and waited for the booth to seal around her. The air hummed as privacy fields activated. Priority channel to Earth Central Command, she said clearly. Authorization, Vance 9, Alpha 2. The communication system processed her request. After a few seconds, the screen lit up with the Earth insignia. Senator Vance, said a stern-faced woman in a dark uniform. This is an unexpected contact. General Hayes, Vance said. We have a situation. A distress signal from Zephyria Prime, Krylos invasion force. The colony is under heavy attack. The general's expression didn't change, but her posture straightened slightly. Zephyria Prime is within our response zone. The assembly fleet won't arrive for 5 days, Vance continued. The council has essentially written off the colony. General Hayes was silent for a moment. I understand. Thank you for the information, Senator. What will you do? Vance asked. The general's expression softened slightly. What we always do, Senator. The right thing. The connection ended. Vance stood in the booth for a long moment before returning to the council chamber. The debate was still ongoing, with representatives arguing about resource allocation for the refugees and diplomatic responses to the Krylos Empire. None of them noticed her small smile as she took her seat again. None of them had any idea what was about to happen. Admiral Vorlag stood on the command deck of the Krylos flagship, the Devourer, watching with satisfaction as the bombardment of Zephyria Prime continued. The view screen showed violet blooms of destruction spreading across the surface of the blue-green planet. His scaled skin gleamed under the harsh lights of the bridge as he turned to his second-in-command. Report on the chroniton scans, he ordered. Commander Krylos bowed slightly, showing the proper respect. Excellent results, Admiral. Initial readings show high concentrations of chroniton particles in the northern continent. The biological material is being processed for chroniton extraction. Biological material, a cold term for the bodies of the colonists. The Krylos didn't waste anything. Not even the species they destroyed. How long until the extraction teams can begin full operations? Vorlag asked. 24 hours, Admiral. Krylos replied. We need to finish the cleansing phase first. Vorlag nodded and turned back to the view screen. The colony's defenses had been pathetically weak. Their orbital platforms had been destroyed in the first minutes of the attack. The ground forces had put up a better fight than expected, but nothing that could truly challenge Krylos' superiority. Now, it was simply a matter of systematic destruction. Admiral, we're picking up unusual readings, reported the sensor officer suddenly. Vorlag frowned. What kind of readings? Energy signatures, sir, coming from the direction of Sector 942. Vorlag consulted his data pad. That's the human sector. Nothing there but a primitive species with minimal space travel. Yes, sir, but these readings... Run a diagnostic, Vorlag said dismissively. It's probably a sensor malfunction. The officer turned back to his console while Vorlag returned his attention to the bombardment. The planet's atmosphere was starting to show signs of the firestorms that would soon rage across its surface. Perfect conditions for the chroniton harvesters. Admiral, the sensor officer's voice was higher now. The readings are confirmed. Multiple objects approaching at speeds that are... impossible. Vorlag felt a flicker of unease. Raise shields. Move the support vessels behind the capital ships. The bridge crew rushed to comply as Vorlag studied the sensor readings himself. The objects were indeed moving at impossible speeds, faster than any known assembly technology. 12 minutes to intercept, the officer continued. Vorlag snarled. Nothing moves that fast. Objects dropping out of hyperspace, shouted the tactical officer. The view screen flickered as 7 sleek, angular vessels appeared suddenly in the midst of the Krylos fleet. Their design was unlike anything Vorlag had seen before. Silver hulls that seemed to refract light in strange ways, with patterns that shifted as they moved. Who are they? Demanded Vorlag. No match in our database, reported the tactical officer. They're broadcasting, said the communications officer. All frequencies, all languages. Put it through, ordered Vorlag. A calm, steady voice filled the bridge speaking perfect standard galactic. This is Captain Marcus Reed of the United Earth Naval Forces. You are engaged in an illegal assault on a Galactic Assembly colony. Cease hostilities immediately, or be neutralized. The bridge fell silent. Commander Krylos was the first to recover. Earth, the humans, he said with a laugh, a harsh sound. They barely have interstellar capability. Vorlag studied the ships on the screen more carefully. Their positioning was perfect, with no wasted movement. Open a channel, he ordered. When the connection was established, Vorlag spoke with all the authority of a Krylos admiral. This is Admiral Vorlag of the Krylos Empire. You have entered a combat zone. Depart immediately or be destroyed. The response was immediate. This is your final warning, Admiral. Stand down your weapons and withdraw from this system. Vorlag snarled. Target the lead ship. Full power to forward batteries. The Krylos flagship's main weapons charged, the energy building to levels that could shatter a small moon. The targeting systems locked onto the nearest human vessel. Fire, ordered Vorlag. The beam lanced out, a spear of pure energy that should have vaporized the human ship instantly. Instead, just before impact, the ship simply shifted. Not a slow turn like assembly vessels, but a movement that seemed to defy the laws of physics itself. The beam passed harmlessly through empty space. How? Vorlag began. And then the humans opened fire. The first human shot didn't destroy the Krylos ship. It didn't need to. A beam of silver energy lanced out from the human vessel, striking the Krylos flagship with surgical precision. The beam didn't hit the main hull or weapon systems. Instead, it sliced through a specific section of the outer ring, the chroniton regulator. Shields down on sectors 3 through 7, shouted the Krylos tactical officer, his voice rising in panic. Before Admiral Vorlag could respond, 2 more human ships fired. Their weapons hit with impossible accuracy, targeting the flagship's engine control and weapons guidance systems. The shots weren't designed to destroy. They were designed to disable. Return fire, Vorlag roared. The Krylos fleet responded, unleashing a barrage that should have annihilated the smaller human vessels. But the humans moved like nothing Vorlag had ever seen. Their ships twisted and turned at angles that seemed to defy physics, evading most of the Krylos fire. The few shots that connected with human ships splashed harmlessly against shields far more advanced than anything in the Krylos arsenal. On the command deck of the USS Sentinel, Captain Marcus Reed sat calmly in his command chair. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency. There was no shouting, no panic, just the quiet hum of professionals at work. Status report, Reed said. Lieutenant Sarah Chen looked up from her tactical display. 3 Krylos dreadnoughts disabled. No casualties reported on our side. Our shields holding at 95%. Reed nodded. And the colony? The Krylos ground forces are still active, sir, reported Commander David Kim from the operations console. But the orbital bombardment has stopped. Good. Signal the Defiance and the Liberty to break off and begin drop-ship deployment. Focus on civilian extraction points. Yes, sir. Reed turned his attention back to the main view screen. The Krylos were regrouping, forming a defensive line with their undamaged ships, protecting the crippled vessels. They're preparing another attack, Lieutenant Chen warned. Let them come, Reed said. Maintain current positions. The Krylos attack came in a wave of energy beams and missile fire. Once again, the human ships moved with unbelievable precision, dodging most of the incoming fire. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Krylos command ship, reported Communications Officer Lieutenant James Park. Put it through, Reed ordered. Admiral Vorlag's face appeared on the screen. His scaled features were tight with fury. What are you? He demanded. These are not human capabilities. Reed allowed himself a small smile. You're operating on outdated intelligence, Admiral. Humanity has chosen to keep certain capabilities private. Impossible. Your species only achieved warp travel a century ago. And yet here we are, Reed replied calmly. I'll repeat my order. Stand down and withdraw from this system, or we will be forced to take more aggressive action. Vorlag snarled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Krylos Empire does not retreat. All vessels concentrate fire on the human flagship. The transmission cut off. They've made their choice, Reed said. Take out their propulsion systems. I want those ships dead in space. What followed was unlike anything the Krylos had experienced in centuries of warfare. The human ships moved in perfect coordination, as if they could predict every Krylos maneuver before it happened. Their weapons fire struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling engines, weapons, and communication systems without destroying the vessels themselves. In the assembly chamber, the representatives watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded on their screens. The data was coming from long-range sensors, delayed by several minutes. "This is impossible," whispered Admiral Thorne. "How are they doing this?" demanded High Chancellor Marn. "Where did these ships come from?" No one had an answer. The tactical displays showed 3 more Krylos ships disabled, engines cold, weapons offline. Not destroyed, deliberately spared, but completely neutralized. On the Krylos flagship, Admiral Vorlag watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically crippled. Ship after ship reported critical systems failures. Not a single human vessel had been seriously damaged. "Admiral," said Commander Krylos, his voice shaking. "What are your orders?" Vorlag stared at the tactical display. In just 15 minutes, the humans had disabled over half his fleet. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Before Vorlag could answer, the view screen lit up again with Captain Reed's face. "Admiral Vorlag," the human said calmly, "your fleet is neutralized. I suggest you reconsider my offer while you still can." While the space battle raged above, the situation on the surface of Zephyria Prime was equally shocking to the Krylos ground forces. Commander Rax led his troops through the burning ruins of the main Zephyrian settlement. His soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, shooting any survivors they found. The Zephyrians were no match for Krylos' combat prowess. Their violet-skinned bodies littered the streets as Rax's forces pushed toward the colony's chroniton processing center. "Set up the extraction equipment in Sector 5, Rax ordered over his comm unit. "Begin processing as soon as—" His orders were interrupted by a strange sound overhead. Looking up, Rax saw small silver objects descending through the smoke-filled sky. They were too small to be ships, yet moved too precisely to be debris. "Unknown objects entering our airspace," reported his tactical officer. "They appear to be some kind of drop pods." Rax signaled his troops to take defensive positions. The objects slowed as they approached the ground, landing with surprising gentleness in a clear area about 200 meters away. "Prepare for engagement," Rax ordered. "Whatever they are, destroy them." His soldiers raised their weapons as the pods began to open. Rax expected to see assembly peacekeepers, or perhaps some unknown species. What emerged instead sent a wave of confusion through his ranks. Humans. Just humans. But they were wearing something strange. Form-fitting suits of silver material with glowing blue lines running across them. "These are the primitives from Sector 942, said his second-in-command with a laugh. "This will be over quickly." Rax wasn't so sure. The humans were deploying with unusual discipline, moving into formation with practiced ease. He counted only 50 of them against his force of over 500 Krylos warriors. "Open fire," he ordered. The Krylos weapons blazed, sending streaks of energy toward the human positions. The humans didn't scatter or panic. Instead, the air around them shimmered as personal shield systems activated, technology the Krylos had believed was still theoretical. Then the humans began to move. Their suits clearly enhanced their physical abilities, allowing them to sprint at speeds that matched even the naturally athletic Krylos. They dodged between buildings and rubble with unnatural grace, flanking positions before Rax could adjust his strategy. The human weapons were equally surprising, compact energy rifles that cut through Krylos' armor with ease. But most shocking was their obvious restraint. The humans were firing at legs and arms, deliberately avoiding kill shots when possible. "Fall back to secondary positions," Rax ordered as his front line began to crumble. As his troops retreated, Rax watched in disbelief as a single human soldier lifted a collapsed building section, weighing at least 2 tons to free trapped Zephyrians. The human's powered suit glowed brighter at the joints as it amplified his strength to impossible levels. Across the colony, similar scenes were playing out. Small teams of humans were systematically securing key areas, establishing medical evacuation points and engaging Krylos forces with overwhelming tactical superiority. At the colony's main medical center, a human squad led by Lieutenant Michael Torres had established a defensive perimeter around hundreds of wounded Zephyrians. The Krylos had surrounded the building, determined to eliminate all survivors as per their standard protocol. "They're coming again," warned Sergeant Ana Rodriguez, checking her weapons charge. "At least 60 of them this time." Lieutenant Torres nodded calmly. His squad consisted of just 12 soldiers, but they had already repelled 2 Krylos assaults. "Connor, how's our shield holding up?" Torres asked. Private Thomas Connor checked the portable shield generator they had deployed. 75%, sir. It'll hold for another wave." The lieutenant tapped his communication unit. "All units, prepare for contact. Remember, non-lethal if possible. We want prisoners, not bodies." As the Krylos charged the position, the humans responded with coordinated fire, their weapons set to stun when possible. 3 humans moved to higher positions, providing covering fire while the others engaged in close-quarters combat. Inside the medical center, Dr. Emily Shaw worked frantically to save Zephyrian lives. She had never treated alien physiology before today, but her medical suit was feeding her information about Zephyrian biology in real time, guiding her actions. More incoming wounded, called a human medic as soldiers carried in injured Zephyrians. A young Zephyrian child looked up at Dr. Shaw with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you the help they said would never come in time?" the child asked in broken standard galactic. Dr. Shaw smiled as she applied a healing gel to the child's injured arm. "Yes," she said simply. "We're here now." 3 hours after the first human ships arrived, the battle for Zephyria Prime was over. The Krylos fleet hung motionless in space, disabled but largely intact. On the planet's surface, the last pockets of Krylos resistance had surrendered. Faced with the impossible choice between yielding or fighting an enemy they could not defeat, Admiral Vorlag stood in his flagship's conference room, his scales dulled with fatigue and shock. Across from him sat Captain Reed, flanked by 2 human officers. Neither side was armed, a gesture of trust that Vorlag found almost as surprising as the human victory. "Your terms?" Vorlag asked simply. Reed slid a datapad across the table. "All Krylos forces will withdraw from this system. Your wounded will be treated and returned to you. Your ships will be repaired enough for safe travel back to your territory, but weapon systems will remain offline." Vorlag blinked slowly, the Krylos equivalent of surprise. "You're letting us go?" "Yes." "Why? You have won. By the rules of war, our lives and ships are yours to claim." Reed leaned forward slightly. "Those aren't our rules, Admiral." On the planet below, human drop ships continued to land, bringing medical teams, engineers, and relief supplies. Within hours, they had established field hospitals in every major settlement and begun distributing food and clean water to the survivors. Commander Kristy Ren, her uniform torn and dirty, watched in amazement as human teams worked with incredible efficiency. She stood outside the colony's main administration building, now serving as a coordination center for relief efforts, as a human officer approached her. "Commander Ren, I'm Major Rebecca Chen, Humanitarian Response Team," the officer said. Ren shook the offered hand, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "How did you get here so fast? The nearest assembly forces were days away." Major Chen smiled. "We were closer than you thought. Earth maintains forward operating bases near all major assembly colonies, just quietly. But the assembly report said humans had limited space capabilities." Chen agreed. "That's what the report said. Before Ren could ask more questions, a young Zephyrian child ran up to Chen, tugging at her uniform. The major knelt down to eye level with the child. "What can I do for you?" she asked gently. "My mother needs medicine," the child said. "The violet doctors don't have the right kind." Chen nodded seriously. "Let's go find your mother." As the major walked away with the child, Ren turned to see a group of human engineers already working to restore power to the colony's damaged grid. In the distance, she could see medical tents where human doctors treated Zephyrian and Krylos, wounded side by side. 4 days later, when the Galactic Assembly Rapid Response Fleet finally arrived, They found a fully operational relief effort already underway. The Krylos fleet had departed under escort from 2 human vessels. Temporary shelters housed displaced colonists, and reconstruction of critical infrastructure had begun. Admiral Thorne beamed down with a team of assembly officials, expecting to find devastation. Instead, he was greeted by Commander Ren and Captain Reed in a functioning command center. "This is unexpected," Admiral Thorne said, looking around at the busy operations room where humans and Zephyrians worked side by side. "The humans arrived within an hour of our distress signal," Ren explained. "They drove off the Krylos and immediately began rescue operations." Admiral Thorne turned to Captain Reed. "How? Your fleet was never reported to have this capacity." Reed smiled politely. "There are many things about humanity that haven't been reported." In a quiet corner of the command center, Major Chen was speaking with an assembly medical officer. "Your treatment protocols for Zephyrian physiology are remarkably advanced," the assembly doctor noted. "We weren't aware humans had such knowledge." Chen shrugged. "We learn quickly. And your field surgery techniques, I've never seen anything like them. The survival rates you've achieved are beyond our standard expectations." "We've had a lot of practice," Chen said quietly. The doctor looked at her curiously. "With Zephyrian physiology?" "With trauma," Chen corrected. "Humans have a long history of treating battlefield injuries." Outside, more assembly ships were arriving in orbit. News of what had happened at Zephyria Prime was spreading throughout the galaxy. The story was always the same. A distress signal was sent, and humans arrived. Humans with technology and capabilities far beyond what anyone had believed possible. What confused the assembly representatives most wasn't the humans' sudden display of military power. It was how they used that power, not for conquest or revenge, but for protection and healing. 1 week after the Battle of Zephyria Prime, the Galactic Assembly High Council convened an emergency session. The circular chamber was packed beyond capacity as representatives from every member species gathered to discuss what many were now calling the human question. High Chancellor Marn called the session to order, his tendrils rippling with barely controlled agitation. "We are here to determine how the humans managed to conceal their true capabilities from the Assembly for 3 years," he announced, "and more importantly, what those capabilities actually are." The chamber erupted in voices as dozens of representatives tried to speak at once. Representative Amal finally gained the floor. He said, "Our investigation has revealed disturbing facts. The human ships that engaged the Krylos do not match any vessels in our official registry. They appear to be part of a separate fleet that humans never disclosed during their provisional membership application." Murmurs swept through the chamber. Concealing military assets was a serious violation of Assembly membership protocols. Furthermore, Amal continued, the technology displayed by these vessels exceeds anything in known space. Their propulsion systems, weapons capabilities, and defensive measures are at least 300 years beyond current Assembly standards. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Chancellor Marn turned to Senator Vance, who sat calmly amid the storm of accusations. "Senator Vance, what explanation does Earth offer for this deception?" Vance stood, her expression composed. "The Earth government has authorized me to introduce someone who can better address your concerns." She gestured to a figure standing in the shadows near the entrance. "With the Council's permission, I present Ambassador Richard Nelson of the United Earth government." A tall, distinguished human with gray hair walked to the center of the chamber. Unlike Vance, who wore the blue robes of an assembly representative, Nelson wore a simple black uniform with a single silver pin on the collar. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," Nelson said, his voice carrying easily through the large space. "I understand your confusion and concern. When humanity joined the Assembly, we did withhold certain information about our technological capabilities. For this, I offer no excuse, only explanation." "Please proceed," Chancellor Marn said stiffly. Nelson nodded. "Humanity's development followed a different path than most species in the Assembly. While many of you achieved space travel before resolving your internal conflicts, Earth unified only after centuries of warfare." He touched a small device on his wrist, and a holographic display appeared above the chamber floor, showing scenes from human history, armies clashing across different eras, from ancient battles to modern conflicts. Our history is marked by almost constant warfare, Nelson continued. This drove rapid technological advancement in certain areas, particularly weapons, defensive systems, and medical treatment for combat injuries. The display changed to show human ships and soldiers, their capabilities far beyond what had been presented during Earth's admission to the Assembly. When we finally achieved global peace and encountered other species, we made a decision, Nelson explained. We would present ourselves not as we were, but as we wished to be seen, a young, somewhat naive species still finding its way in the galaxy. You lied, stated a Veln representative bluntly. We omitted, Nelson corrected. We showed you our civilian technology, our cultural achievements, our scientific understanding. We simply didn't show you our military capacity. Why? Demanded Admiral Thorne. Nelson's expression softened. Because of how others have reacted throughout history when discovering a militarily advanced neighbor. Fear leads to preemptive action. We wanted you to know us as people before you knew us as a potential threat. The chamber was silent as the representatives processed this information. It was Representative Zorin who finally spoke, his ancient voice carrying unexpected weight. And your unified planetary government, was that also hidden from us? Nelson nodded. Most assembly species achieved unified planetary rule only after centuries of space exploration and external threats. Humanity unified through internal struggle, reaching consensus through conflict rather than necessity. Chancellor Marn leaned forward. What else have you concealed? Much, Nelson admitted, but not out of malice. We simply needed to be certain we would be accepted as equals rather than feared as conquerors. The holographic display changed again, showing the human relief efforts on Zephyria Prime, soldiers helping injured Zephyrians, engineers rebuilding infrastructure, doctors treating the wounded regardless of species. 2 months after the events at Zephyria Prime, the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The Galactic Assembly had been thrown into turmoil by the revelations about humanity's true nature. Some species called for Earth's expulsion from the Assembly. Others suggested a military alliance. A few even proposed putting restrictions on human space travel. In the end, the Assembly did what large political bodies often do when faced with unprecedented situations. They formed a committee. The Human Integration Commission met in a neutral space station orbiting a dead star far from any inhabited worlds. Representatives from 12 major assembly species sat across from a human delegation led by Ambassador Nelson. Your proposal is unusual, said Chancellor Marn, who had been appointed to lead the commission. We believe it's the best path forward, Nelson replied. Earth will share its medical technology, defensive systems, and agricultural innovations with the Assembly. In return, we ask for full membership and participation in the Assembly's defense planning. Admiral Thorne tapped a claw against the table. The problem, Ambassador, is trust. You concealed your capabilities once. How can we be certain you aren't still hiding something? You can't, Nelson said simply. Just as we can't be certain that every assembly species has revealed all their capabilities. Trust must be built over time through actions, not words. The debate continued for hours, with various representatives expressing concerns and demands. Through it all, Nelson remained calm, neither defensive nor apologetic. Meanwhile, on Zephyria Prime, a more practical form of integration was taking place. Human engineers worked alongside Zephyrian builders to reconstruct the colony. The latest in human agricultural technology was being implemented, promising yields 5 times higher than before the attack. In the colony's new medical center, Dr. Shaw was training Zephyrian medical staff in advanced trauma care. The violet-skinned aliens watched with fascination as she demonstrated techniques developed over centuries of human warfare. Why share this knowledge with us? Asked a Zephyrian doctor. Your species could dominate the galaxy with your technology. Dr. Shaw looked up from the medical simulator. And then what? Rule through fear. Stand alone against whatever comes next. That's not the future we want. Similar scenes played out across the colony, where humans freely shared their knowledge and skills without expectation of payment or political advantage. It was this more than any official declaration that began to change how the galaxy viewed humanity. Back at the Assembly headquarters, the final vote on Earth's status was about to take place. Thousands of representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for what would be a historic decision. Chancellor Marn called for order as Ambassador Nelson waited calmly at the speaker's podium. "Before we vote," Marn announced, "we have received a communication from Zephyria Prime. Commander Ren wishes to address the council." The main screen lit up, showing Kristy Ren standing in the rebuilt colony center. Behind her, humans and Zephyrians worked side by side. "Honorable representatives," she began, "I understand your fear of humanity. 2 months ago, I might have shared it, but I've seen these humans not just fight for us, but bleed for us, work for us, teach us. They had the power to conquer, but chose to protect. They had knowledge they could have sold, but chose to share." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "What arrived at our colony when we sent our distress signal was not the horror many of you now fear. What arrived was humanity at its best. Powerful, yes, but guided by compassion rather than conquest. If that horrifies you, perhaps the problem lies not with them, but with your expectations." The chamber was silent when the transmission ended. After a moment, Representative Zoran stood, his ancient frame rising slowly. "I have lived long enough to see many species join the Assembly," he said. "None have entered under such unusual circumstances, but perhaps that is fitting. Humans are an unusual species. They developed weapons that could destroy worlds, then chose not to use them. They achieved the power to conquer, then chose to protect. They mastered violence, then chose peace." He looked at Ambassador Nelson. "What horrifies us is not just your capacity for destruction, but the realization that we have misunderstood you from the beginning. You are not simply warriors or diplomats. You are both, and that makes you unlike any species we have encountered." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Earth was granted full membership in the Galactic Assembly with special responsibility for rapid response to distress calls throughout the galaxy. As Nelson left the chamber, Admiral Thorne approached him. "Captain Reed told me something interesting," the Admiral said. "He said the chroniton pulse that reached you was sent back in time." Nelson smiled. "Time is a curious thing, Admiral. Sometimes the future sends help to the past. And sometimes," Thorne replied, "the past teaches the future humility." They walked together toward the chamber exit, two representatives of species who had just begun to truly understand each other. Above them, human ships patrolled the space lanes, ready to answer the next distress call, not as conquerors, but as protectors. Not as feared warriors, but as trusted allies.